What happens when a religious movement believes its leader is the Messiah, and then he dies? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But I'm not talking about early Christianity. I'm talking about Chabad-Lubavitch, a Hasidic Jewish movement that spans the globe and is still wrestling with that exact question. Today we're diving into the Messianic divide within Chabad, the mysterious appearances of a dead Rebbe, and why some followers still greet an empty chair. Let's get into it. Menachem Mendel Schneerson, known simply as the Rebbe, was the seventh leader of Chabad-Lubavitch. He transformed the movement from a small Hasidic group into a global powerhouse, sending emissaries called shluchim to over 100 countries from his headquarters at 770 Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights, New York, known simply as 770. To many of his followers, also called Chabadniks, he wasn't just a teacher or rabbi. He was the Messiah, Moshiach. In 1952, the Rebbe announced, quote, "Moshiach is about to arrive, and not only the younger of the group, but the eldest of the group, in his lifetime, Moshiach will come." End quote. In 1969, he called for the completion of the Moshiach's Sefer Torah, the Torah scroll meant for the Messiah. There were campaigns announcing the imminent arrival of Moshiach, especially in the early 90s, with the threat of Iraq trying to draw Israel into the First Gulf War. Messianic fervor was at its height in that period. Even though the Rebbe never explicitly stated he believed himself to be the Messiah, in the 90s he allowed chants in his presence that called him the Messiah. Expectations were through the roof. But then, in 1994, he died from a stroke, his second, with his followers singing and dancing outside the Beth Israel Medical Center, still declaring his messiahship. He had no children, no appointed successor, and no final word on whether he truly was the Redeemer. Chabad didn't officially split. Instead, it fractured internally and often silently. There are what you could say 3 big groups. The first one are the open messianists, also called open meshachists. They publicly declare that Schneerson is the Messiah, and not metaphorically.
Do you believe the Rebbe was the Messiah?
Definitely. There's no question that of all the criteria that Maimonides writes of the Messiah, he had.
They attend the synagogue in the basement level of 770. There's a more mainstream messianist view, similar to Christianity, and a more radical messianist view, which maintains the Rebbe never died. As anthropologist Simon Dean states it in his book Lubavitcher Messianism, What Really Happens When Prophecy Fails, quote, "While some messianists hold that Menachem Schneerson died but is to be resurrected as the Messiah, others hold that he is still alive but concealed or recluded. A small minority assert that he has godlike powers, or even that he is the creator himself." End quote. Fellow anthropologist Yoram Bilou, in his book Withers More Than Ever, Making the Absent Rebbe Present in Messianic Chabad, states on page 170, quote, "Radical Chabad Hasidim are committed to the belief that the Rebbe lives in body and in soul at 770. They continue to see him there, just as before." End quote. The open Meshachists wear yellow lapel pins and wave flags with a crown on them to indicate their belief that the Rebbe is Moshiach. They chant, "Yechi Adonenu Morenu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMoshiach L'Olam V'Od," which means, "Long live our Master, Teacher, and Rabbi, King Messiah, forever and ever." In the synagogue, during services, they will make a path called a shvil for the Rebbe, who in a concealed state, according to their beliefs, makes his way to the bimah, a raised platform where he used to stand. As stated earlier, this group has different types of views on the divine status of the Rebbe. As Dean says in his book, quote, "A unique facet of Hasidism and the way in which Hasidim differ from other ultra-Orthodox groups is the idea of the tzaddik, or Rebbe, a perfectly righteous man who is the spiritual leader of the group, and a mystical intermediary between the divine and the community, a position which accords him an unprecedented role in his followers' lives." End quote. Followers want to be physically close to a Rebbe, and even when they are geographically far removed from him, are taught to imagine him as present as possible. So, a Rebbe already has a very elevated status in the lives of any Hasidic group. And any righteous man, that is, the tzaddik or Rebbe, in any generation has the potential to become the Messiah. But in Chabad, there is an added level of closeness to the divine. As Yoram Bilou says on page 188 of his book, quote, "In Chabad's radical wing, the boundary between the Rebbe and God himself has grown increasingly fuzzy, to the point where some identify the Rebbe as God. The Chabad mainstream lashes out at the movement's fringe groups that explicitly attribute godly status to the Rebbe, terming them Elokists, from Elohim, one of God's names, with the H replaced by a K to avoid pronouncing the sacred word." End quote. And on page 195 of the same book, quote, "Well-known rabbis of the Meshachist school have referred to the Rebbe as the essence of God's being." End quote. Especially converts, called Bala Tshuva, by which is meant secular Jews who become religious again and join Chabad, these converts seem to feel more comfortable being creative and playing outside the confines of more mainstream Chabad thinking. They tend to have, for lack of a better word, higher Christological beliefs about the Rebbe, while many old hats express doubts about these views. Here's one example of a convert's extreme views. Quote, "The Rebbe doesn't differ from God in many ways. If you really understand the Torah, you can see that the Rebbe is God. I do feel that the Rebbe is actually God. There is no Rebbe. The Rebbe is head of the Lubavitch and also God. You can have a picture of him. We can have an image of God, and the Rebbe's picture is a picture of God. The Rebbe has a physical body, but he is God, therefore he cannot die. People hear this, but are scared to talk about it. Isaac Luria actually states that the Messiah is God. There are Talmudic teachings as well, saying that the Rebbe is God. However, it is not simple. You have to study for a long time before you understand it." End quote. and that was Mordechai Glatt, a Jewish convert to Chabad, as quoted on page 107 of Simon Dean's book. The second main group is what I'd call the quiet Messianists or Meshichists. They believe many of the same things, but keep it more under wraps. Some do it out of respect for the wider Jewish world. The most common belief amongst them is most likely the view that the Rebbe died and that he will be resurrected soon and return as the Messiah, similar to Christian views of Jesus. And then finally, there is the group of non-messianists. They reject the idea of the Rebbe being the Messiah.
Was he the Messiah to you?
No, he was not. A Messiah has to be a living person. He just inspired us to put us on the right path to bring the Messiah. And for all I know is right now, he might be standing in front of what we call the Beis Din Shemayim, demanding that God bring the Messiah right now.
They are likely the minority, although it's hard to say as there are no exact numbers. For them, Messianic talk distracts from the Rebbe's real legacy, education, Jewish outreach, and religious practice. They attend the downstairs synagogue as well, but sometimes also use the smaller shul upstairs, where the radical Messianists don't run everyday affairs. Here's a typical view of such a member. Quote, I think everyone in Lubavitch at that time believed the Rebbe was Moshiach. I remember believing this quite clearly. The Rebbe implied this himself. Yes, I thought that the redemption would come. When the Rebbe died, I stopped believing it. After all, how can the Rebbe die and still be Moshiach? Only God knows who Moshiach is. We cannot know. We misunderstood the Rebbe. He could have been Moshiach if God had willed it, but we were wrong in our assumptions. We all look forward to the redemption. This is a basic tenet of Jewish belief. There will be a time when evil and suffering will end. Only God knows when this will happen. We can bring Moshiach by the performance of mitzvot. End quote. And that was Samuel Fishbein, as quoted on page 82 of Simon Dean's book. But here's the twist. All these views coexist at the same time, which is also interesting when asking oneself about early Christian communities and all the different views under the same roof they may have had. So, in Chabad, all of these views coexist in the same community-ish. It's unity with lots of internal tension, even literal fighting at times. The Chabad leadership upstairs distance itself from the more extreme Messianism, while most in the downstairs group have no problem being open and proud about their Messianism. And even though early on other Hasidic groups use very strong language, calling Schneerson a madman, heretic, and another famous Rebbe, the Satmar Rebbe, sarcastically said after his death, now we have to wait for the real Messiah. Nowadays, the relations seem to have mellowed between Chabad and other Hasidim over the decades. Even with the Messianists still being a vocal group within Chabad. And now Chabad is more popular than ever, sending out their emissaries or shluchim to every corner of the globe to found Chabad houses that serve all Jews and try to make them religiously observant again.
I want to say for all our viewers, if you travel anywhere in the world and you benefit from Chabad, it's very likely, not very likely, it's a big part from the Kotlarski family. His father, Mendel, shluchim of the Rebbe, making sure that you, no matter where you are in the world, have a kosher meal, have a minyan, have a mikvah. So thank you for your holy work.
Well, listen, it's all the Rebbe, and we're just very lucky to be able to have a small part, and it's really meaningful to see it work. So Keep it up. Keep it going. Naki, nice to see you.
Sparking memes such as these. The Chabad movement sees the success of their emissary work as evidence that the Rebbe is still alive. They will open his books to random pages for his advice, making him alive in his words. They have websites, YouTube channels, social media outreach to show his speeches around the clock, on repeat. They tell stories about miracles performed by the Rebbe after his concealment, stories from people who claim to have seen appearances of him, not as a ghost, but as a real man. And they see all of that as evidence that he is somehow still alive and still active in the world. Let's talk about the oil, the Rebbe's grave in Queens, New York. Thousands visit every year. They write him letters asking for blessings. But not everyone goes. Some Messianists don't go, because to visit a grave is to admit the person is dead. As Mordechai Heilman says, quote, I do not visit the oil. I know the Rebbe is not there. He is still alive in 770. I can feel his presence there strongly. I've personally not seen him. Rarely people claim that they can see him there. Some Messianists visit the grave. This is to go to the grave of the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe is not dead. End quote. That is from Simon Dean's book on page 109. And this is why at 770 the Rebbe's chair is still treated with reverence. People greet it as though he were physically sitting there. As I said before, they even clear a path for him before prayers. He may be invisible, but in their minds he's present. Here's a description of what such a making the Rebbe present ritual looks like on page 93 and 94 of Yoram Bilu's book. Quote, prior to each service, after the cover is removed from his chair and lectern, the Hasidim direct their gaze at the staircase leading to the occluded Rebbe's study on the 2nd floor. They welcome him by singing Long Live Our Lord, while opening up a path in the middle of the room to allow him to reach the platform where his seat is located. At the end of the prayer, the crowd again splits, singing and dancing as the Rebbe makes his way out. On the nights following Sabbaths and holidays, audiences with the Rebbe are held in the study hall, just as in the past. The furnishings are the same ones that were always used. A white tablecloth covers the Rebbe's table, and loaves of challah and kiddush wine are placed on it. The Rebbe's chair stands by the table, and the Hasidim sit facing him. A talk by the Rebbe is projected onto a screen or is read out loud by one of the rabbis. At the end of the audience, one of the elder Hasidim approaches and breaks the challah into tiny pieces that are distributed among the Hasidim. Slices of the Rebbe's cake, lekach, are handed out twice a year on the eve of Yom Kippur and on Hushaina Rabbah. A glass of wine is passed around 3 times a year at the end of the audience on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah, the night after Simchas Torah, and the night after the holiday on the 7th day of Pesach. Special practices of making the Rebbe present are reserved for the holidays of the Jewish month of Tishra, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchas Torah. When the Yom Kippur prayers are concluded, a portable set of steps is brought into the room for the occluded Rebbe to stand on, so that he can view his Hasidim and hear their singing as he did in the past. On Sukkot, a personal sukkah, the temporary booth, is built for him, and the 4 species of the holiday are placed there for him to use. Hasidim and other devotees file through the sukkah. Some of them extend their hands, whether in joy or in confusion, pretending to receive a piece of cake from the Rebbe. When he is called up to the Torah and expected to read a section of the weekly Torah portion, the entire room falls silent, with all eyes on his chair. After he makes the opening declaration of the blessing for reading the Torah, inaudible to the human ear, the entire congregation calls out the traditional response in perfect synchronization. Dollar bills continue to be distributed on Sundays in the Rebbe's name, and the Hasidim stand on line, as in the past, even if they cannot see the Rebbe with their own eyes. When the Hasidim stand beside the Rebbe's platform, their gaze is fixed on his chair, and they ask for his blessing. Many of them, no doubt, conjure up his image in their minds. It seems likely that the experience of seeing the Rebbe at 770 is mediated, at least in some cases, by such visual imaging as part of a process of sensory override in which summoning up the Rebbe's image turns into an actual appearance of seeing him." End quote. Now, this is where it gets wild. Since 1994, lots of people have reported seeing the Rebbe after his death. Not metaphorically, they mean it literally. Anthropologist Yoram Bilou states in his book on page 146, quote, "While Chabad Hasidim see the Rebbe in special states of consciousness, such as dreams, he also often appears to them while they are wide awake, in the normal course of their daily activities. Although apparitions of this type are rare in Jewish tradition, I have assembled about 80 reports of apparitions in which the Rebbe reveals himself to his followers in this way. Most of them come from Sichat HaGeulah. 57 are found in the anthology Lifkoach et Ha'enaim, Open Your Eyes. The rest come from interviews with Meshechist activists, several of whom experienced such apparitions themselves." End quote. The website seeingtherebbe.com has English translations of stories about appearances of the Rebbe from the book Open Your Eyes. In one such testimonial, a woman called Chava Cohen is claimed to have experienced the following in 1996, that is, a full 2 years after the Rebbe's death. Chava Cohen's testimonial starts off with the following explanatory note. Quote, "Many are familiar with the famous photo from 5752, that is 1992, in which we see the Rebbe, Melech HaMoshiach, receiving in his holy hands a tambourine on which is written Yechi Adonenu. Fewer know that the one who was behind this initiative and who gave the tambourine to the Rebbe was Mrs. Chava Cohen, a resident of Crown Heights. Mrs. Cohen merited to see the Rebbe, Melech HaMoshiach, with her own eyes twice over the course of the last decade." It then goes on to give her testimony. Quote, "The first time was in the year 5756, 1996, in the house of my son, Shlomo Zalman, who serves as the Rebbe's shliach in Sheepshead Bay in New York. He made a farbrengen for the Sholem Zocher for the birth of his son, my grandson, and me and my daughter-in-law's mother were in the house. The men sat and farbrenged, talking, singing, making l'chaim, in the living room to celebrate the joyous occasion, and we sat in the kitchen while she was busy preparing things for the Farbrengen. Suddenly, I lifted my eyes, and at a distance of about 3 to 3.5 meters, 9 to 10 feet, I saw the Rebbe, Melech HaMoshiach. I was completely shocked, and I wasn't able to move. I saw the Rebbe for about half a minute. When I calmed down from the excitement, I got up and went to the place where I saw the Rebbe, Melech HaMoshiach. But now, I already didn't see anything. I decided to tell myself, "Stop imagining things. You are hallucinating." I sat down again in my place and didn't say anything to anyone. After about 5 minutes, my daughter-in-law's mother came to me with her hands trembling all over, and she said to me, "Chavi, you won't believe it." I asked her what happened. She replied, "I just saw the Rebbe." I asked, "Where did you see him?" She answered, "I came from the sink to the refrigerator, and from the refrigerator I walked back to the sink, and both times I saw the Rebbe." "Where exactly did you see the Rebbe?" I asked. She pointed to exactly the spot where I had seen Rebbe. I told her, "Leah, yes, I believe you. I saw the Rebbe in the same place 5 minutes ago. If only I saw the Rebbe even 1,000 times, I would be convinced I was hallucinating. And if my daughter-in-law's mother also would see the Rebbe without confirmation from me afterwards that I also saw, she would think she's imagining things. But we saw, both of us, in the same place, at the Sholem Zocher, in the Chabad house." End quote. Another entry on the website tells of the Rebbe appearing to a skeptic, an all too familiar trope of the skeptic or mocker turning into a believer. Quote, "This was in the year 5763, 2003, that I brought a group of women from my city to 770 in honor of Chov Bei Shvat. My sister-in-law, Mazel Tov Ben Sabo, also came along. She is a frum woman who grew up with Emunat Tzadikim, faith in Tzadikim, which is the reason she came along with us. For her, this was the first time she was ever by the Rebbe. We arrived on Thursday, the 20th of Shvat, in the afternoon. After we got organized a bit, we went to sit in 770 for a shiur by one of the women in the neighborhood who was explaining very clearly the uniqueness of 770 Beis Moshiach, and she emphasized the eternal life of the Rebbe, neshama in a body. Her talk mentioned the shvil, pathway, that opens up among the masses of people who fill 770 before and after the davening at the Rebbe's minyan. The Hasidim stand on two sides and sing Yechi to greet the Rebbe with song and melody. After the shiur, my sister-in-law opened up to me with a lot of anger, complaining that she didn't want to hear such things. She had already heard about the emunah of the Hasidim that the Rebbe is alive, but to her, the shvil that was spoken about was just too much. She said such insulting things that it's not right to repeat them, and my attempts to explain it didn't help. Despite everything, she arrived with us to 770 for Kabbalat Shabbat the next night. She purposely sat in the first seat opposite the Rebbe's place. A few minutes before the davening, she saw how they prepared the Rebbe's shtender, since it was customary for the Rebbe to daven for the Amud on this day in honor of his wife, the Rabbanit Chaya Mushka. Again, she started to ridicule and insult the idea, and I wasn't able to stop her. A few minutes went by, and the shvil opened up for the Rebbe with the singing of Yechi. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law was looking around below in the men's section of the shul. The davening began when suddenly I saw the face of my sister-in-law had changed and turned as white as plaster. She continued to look like she'd been struck by shock, and after a moment she opened up to me with tears in her eyes, and she said, "I'm in shock. You won't believe it, but just now I saw the Rebbe." I calmed her down, and she told me that just then she had seen the Rebbe passing through the shvil that had opened up for him with his siddur in his holy hand, and he got to the Oren Kodesh and touched the paroiches. After this, she wasn't able to see anything more. Needless to say, this revelation changed her whole outlook, and she made the most of the rest of her visit. End quote. Some people not only have appearances that are visual, but also auditory. Quote, "At around 1:30 a.m., I awoke suddenly, and when I opened my eyes, I was surprised that there was someone standing by my bed. Right away, I looked at this person to see who it is that came into my room at so late an hour, and I was shocked to see this was none other than the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe stood by my bed and said in a clear voice, 'Don't worry, the financial situation of your parents will be okay.' When he finished speaking, he disappeared as fast as he had come." End quote. For many, these appearances are proof that the Rebbe is not only alive, but active, and their emotional reaction is further evidence that their experience must be real and confirms the Rebbe lives. Some also report seeing a light, similar to the story Paul tells us. Quote, "In the meantime, the next speaker began, Rabbi and Chassid and Kabbalist Yitzchak Ginsburg, who began to explain the subject of the Geula according to Kabbalah. Suddenly, I felt a special feeling. I lifted my eyes, and I saw the Rebbe standing across from me, for real, mamash. The sight continued for a few seconds, and then suddenly I saw a great light that I couldn't tolerate to look at. I lowered my eyes, and when I raised them back, I couldn't see the Rebbe any more." Around this time, I had heard here and there about talk and opinions about the Rebbe having eternal life, but it was before I considered myself a dedicated Messianist. But this sight influenced me tremendously. Despite it all, one thing bothered me: the aged appearance of the Rebbe. In all the photos or videos that I'd seen until then, I remembered the Rebbe looking younger, but now I saw him quite aged. After a few days, I had the chance to visit a friend in Jerusalem. By divine providence, she showed me a video of the Rebbe giving out dollars at the beginning of the 5750s, and when I watched the video, I noticed suddenly that the Rebbe looked older, exactly like I'd seen him." End quote. The Messianists even claimed to have photographic and video evidence. As Yoram Bilou states on pages 155 through 157 of his book, quote, "This is eminently clear in two public events that caused an uproar among Messianists. The first involves a boy from Jerusalem who had gone to 770 with his family in Tishra 2004 to be with the Rebbe. His parents took his picture in front of the bima at the synagogue that is part of the building. To their astonishment, when the photograph was processed, it showed an elderly chassid standing near the boy with his back to the camera. They and others identified the man as the Rebbe. The parents insisted that no one but the boy stood there when they took the photograph. While the identification set off a controversy in Chabad, many Messianists maintain that the photograph provides the missing link that validates the Rebbe's eternal presence. The second event took place on October 14, 2006. A visitor to the synagogue at 770 took a video with his cell phone of the path that Hasidim opened to make way for the Rebbe prior to a prayer service. Many visitors take such videos and pictures to document their experience, but this time the camera caught a low figure with a white beard striding energetically toward the holy ark between the dancing and singing Hasidim on each side. Even though the image appears for only a split second and the footage is of low quality, the Messianists have stated with certainty that the figure is the Rebbe, and that the revelation began on that day. The huge excitement set off by the event was described by one Chassid, quote, "For years since the occlusion on Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe, the King Messiah Shlita, has revealed himself many times to individuals, especially at 770. What was new this time was that he was seen by hundreds of thousands." End of his quote. The film clip was seen over and over again on Messianist websites, and still pictures taken from it are used by some activists as screensavers. End of full quote. Before he died, the Rebbe was known for handing out $1 bills on Sundays. The idea was simple: use the dollar for charity and spread goodness. But today, those Rebbe dollars are treated as spiritually powerful objects. Many believe they carry miraculous energy. Some Chabad houses keep a dollar framed by the entrance. Others lend them out to people in crisis. eBay listings have even appeared selling Rebbe dollars for hundreds of dollars, sometimes more. For believers, these aren't just souvenirs. They're tangible connections to a living Rebbe. Yoram Bilou recounts a miracle story involving such a dollar on page 84 of his book. Quote, "The dollar bills, which retain the holiness of the Rebbe's touch, evince healing powers in many ways. They are placed under the pillows of the ill and injured in order to aid their recovery. This was done, for example, by the father of a soldier in Israel's border police who was shot in the chest at the beginning of the Second Intifada. He was hospitalized in serious condition and was unconscious for more than 2 weeks. After the dollar was placed under his pillow, he opened his eyes and began to move his arms and legs." End quote. Believers also attribute special powers to his book Igrot Kodesh, or in the Ashkenazi pronunciation Igris Kodesh, which means holy letters. They consult this book as an oracle, the way Christians sometimes do with the Bible, opening it to random pages and reading the passages as messages from the Rebbe specifically to them. There are several volumes, and as any page in those letters generally will contain some words of encouragement or other to have or keep faith, which we would label Barnum statements that feel personal but are very general, lots can be cherry-picked from these texts to bolster any need or doubt the believer has, and give the believer confirmation that when they, for example, doubt an appearance of the Rebbe, that they get reassurance that it was an actual appearance. They also attribute miracle powers to the water from the Rebbe's mikveh, the Jewish ritual bath. So here we are, a community whose leader was proclaimed the Messiah, whose death led not to collapse, but to reinterpretation and success, whose followers say he will return, and some say he never left. Sound familiar? In the 1st century, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. His followers said, "He is risen. He will return. His death is not the end." As with the Rebbe, they reported posthumous visions. They believed in posthumous miracles. They faced criticism from fellow Jews. Some scholars call Chabad the closest Judaism has come to birthing a second Christianity, though Chabad insiders strongly reject that idea. But the patterns are there: the grief, the reinterpretation, the appearances, the fervent hope of return. So, is the Rebbe dead, alive, concealed, waiting to return? That depends on who you ask. And that's the paradox of Chabad today, a movement united by a man who's been gone for 30 years, but who for many never left. But here's something to think about. In early Christianity, the original followers of Jesus in Jerusalem, possibly led by his brother James, may have had a very different vision of what the movement was supposed to be compared to what would become Christian orthodoxy. But then in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. The community was wiped out. And the version of Christianity shaped by Paul, with its emphasis on the divine Christ and salvation through faith, became dominant. What if we imagine something similar were to happen in Chabad? What if some unexpected trauma, war, or a deep internal crisis wiped out the upstairs non-messianists and left the downstairs radical messianists intact? How would their theology evolve? Would that theology become official orthodoxy? And what would be lost to history? I'll end with a joke non-Chabad Jews tell about the Chabadniks. What's the difference between Moses and the Lubavitcher Rebbe? Moses, we know he died, but we don't know where he's buried. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, we know where he's buried, but we're not sure that he died. Thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something. Give the video a like and subscribe for more content.